Hello and welcome everyone. In this section, we will build a Razor Pages CRUD web app, and in the first part, we'll create a new ASP.NET Core project. And so let's flip over to Visual Studio 2022 and start coding. So this is my Microsoft Visual Studio 2022, and we'll create a new project. And this will be ASP.NET Core Web App Razor Pages project, and click on Next. So Web Application 1. So now I have come to the Configure Your New Project, and I have given the project name Razor Product App, and I have put a suitable location for my project to reside, and the solution name is the same as Razor Product App. Here you remember that you can always change, you have the flexibility of changing the solution name to differ from the project name, but I choose it to be the same with the project name. And then click on Next. And on this additional information page, I've got this .NET 8 long-term support. I've got the option of either selecting 6, 7 or 8, but 8 is the latest and the most advanced with the most additional features, and I will configure it for HTTPS. I don't need to enable Docker, and do not use top level statement. I'm keeping unchecked because it will use the top level statement, which is the current best practice. So click on Create. So it has created a new Razor product app, which is a Razor Pages application. So let's start with the exploring the project structure for this Razor Pages web application. So I will start with app.settings.json file. So this is the app.settings.json file. Now this file will ultimately store the configuration settings for our application, such as the database connection string when we have actually created the connection string. So don't worry, we'll do it ultimately. And the API keys if there are any, and other application settings. It allows you to easily manage your application's configuration without hard coding values in your code. Next in importance is the launch settings.json. Actually, this is all of these files are important, so there is no particular way that I could actually categorize that this is more important or not, but we have to cover all of them, the important files. So that's how I am started. Now this file, launch settings.json file, is used to configure how your application launches in different environments, such as these are the development environments by default, and also you could configure it for staging and production. It defines profiles for debugging and hosting your application. Okay, profiles, HTTPS, IIA for IIS, Express, etc., etc. And it includes setting like the port number, environment variable, and launch URL. So launch URL, application URL, or launch URL, and the port number, SSL port, and then here also application URL and the port numbers. These are the port numbers again. So, and there is the shared layout.cshtml file. Now this file is in the shared folder, okay, and it is a master layout page that defines the common layout structure for your application. It typically includes elements such as HTML and head section and section on navigation menu and footer. Okay, navigation menu is here. This is all the navigation menu, and this is the footer. Any Razor pages that use this layout, that is the layout.cshtml, will inherit its structure and content. And then we come to this validation script.partial, validation scripts partial.cshtml file. This is another important file, and this partial view, this is a partial view. It contains the JavaScript code for client-side validation using the jQuery unobtrusive validation. It's automatically included in pages that use validation helpers like validation summary and validation message. And then we come to the view imports file. You can see at using Razor product app, which is the name of the application or the project, and for the namespace Razor product app.pages, it will automatically import. So this file allows you to import namespaces and define global directives that apply to all Razor pages in your application. It's commonly used to import common namespaces like Microsoft .ASP.NET Core.MVC.Razor pages, and like Microsoft.ASP.NET Core.MVC.TagHelpers, as well as custom namespaces for your project. And then we have got this view start. So view start file is used to specify layout and view execution settings that apply to all Razor pages in a directory and its subdirectories. It is often used to set the default layout for pages within a specific folder or to configure global settings like page model type. And then this root, this has got a CSS folder and a JavaScript folder and a library folder. It's all the CSS will stay over here, and so are the JavaScript files over here. And this library folder has got several subfolders like Bootstrap, jQuery, jQuery validation, unobtrusive. So understanding the purpose of these key files in your Razor pages ASP.NET Core project is essential for building and maintaining a successful application. From managing configuration setting to defining layout structure and view execution settings, these files play a crucial role in the development process. Hello and welcome again. So in the previous lecture, in part 1, we have built a Razor pages CRUD, a Razor pages web app, and I've explained a bit of the project structure, and in this lecture we will add a product model class. So let's again flip over to Visual Studio. So on this Visual Studio, Razor product app that we have built, we'll add a new folder and name it models. Add a class to it, and this will be our product class with capital P. So automatically it takes the namespace Razor product app, which is the project name, .models folder, and public class product. And in this product class, I'll build a few properties like ID. Of course, it has come ID, string name, string manufacturer, and double price. So this IntelliSense has already suggested me something which was in my mind. So I have just clicked tab, and because I'm using GitHub Copilot also, and I'll accept by hitting the tab, and this is already built for me. Public int ID, string name, and string manufacturer, and price is a double or a float. All right. So this will be our product model, which will be used subsequently to create the ProductDbContext class, and that's about it for this lecture. In my previous lecture on creating the model, product model, I have shown you that I have used GitHub Copilot for auto completion of my code. So I've shown you, if you look into the earlier lecture on model creation, it has suggested me some code for completing the product class, and I have just tabbed to actually accept that code. So what is this thing about GitHub Copilot? So if you have not heard about GitHub Copilot, this is your GitHub Copilot page. Okay, so I'm on a trial account, and how do you have access to this? So once you click on the profile photograph on your profile picture, it is your Copilot will be there. And if you click on your Copilot, this is where it gets. I have already filled the necessary information to activate my trial period, which is 1 month, which is nearing end, but I will obviously extend the, I will go for a paid version. So it is so useful. Now, what is this GitHub Copilot? Just a quick chat about the GitHub Copilot. It's an AI-powered code completion tool developed by GitHub in collaboration with OpenAI. It uses machine learning models trained on a vast amount of code from open source repositories to provide suggestions and auto-completions while developers write code. And it aims to assist developers by suggesting entire lines or blocks of code based on context of what they are typing. It can help speed up development, reduce boilerplate code, and offer insights into best practices and patterns. Now, Copilot is integrated directly into code editors like Visual Studio Code as well as Visual Studio, and I have integrated it with my Visual Studio 2022 environment, and let me show you how I have done it. So if I click on this application and then click on the extensions, manage extensions, and since I have already installed this is the GitHub Copilot completions. I have the choice of disabling it or uninstalling it, but I will go with the ability to be able to complete the code blocks with GitHub tool. So you can always search for the GitHub Copilot and you can easily install it. So that's the thing about GitHub Copilot. And so quickly, if you'd like to write a small function, you can easily do it by, say, for example, let me create anywhere. I can write the code in let's go for a CS file, that is a product class. Okay, just double front slash, it's just like a comment. So that's one of the easiest part. So just I have prompted it to write how to create a sum of two integers in a method. So public int add int a int b. Okay, so that's about it. And this quickly lining is because I have not put this add method within the class, because it will accept any code or any method within a class, and it was outside the class. Class is already finished now. It is, the squiggly line is gone, and this is one of the easiest functions that is auto completed by the, but this is just a demo. This is auto completed by the GitHub Copilot, and you can write many more complex things. You start writing something and it will give you auto completion, and it is for up to your skill level to accept it, reject it, or just accept and then edit it. So that's everything about GitHub Copilot in a nutshell. Welcome once again. In this lecture today, we will be taking our Razor Pages CRUD app, product CRUD app, a bit further, and we'll create a database context class for products. So let's flip over to Visual Studio now. So I've got this product class already made, and then let me get rid of this comment when I was showing you GitHub Copilot. Okay, so I'll create a data folder, a new folder, add new folder, call it data. So add a class, name it ProductDbContext. All right. It derives from, it is supposed to extend the DbContext class. However, this there is a quick actions because there is a this line error, so it is asking me to install package entity framework, install with package manager. So entity framework is not there. Now let me get the entity framework from the NuGet package manager. So it has come up with this Microsoft.entity framework core, latest table 8.0.5, and let me click on install button. It will install. Click on accept. So this is installed. This is the NuGet package manager Microsoft.entity framework core. This package is essential for including entity framework core for generating databases in your project. So back to ProductDbContext class, and it is still not happy. Let's see what is the cause. So you have to bring it in the library in your code behind file, right? Now this is the beauty of GitHub Copilot. When I have created this ProductDbContext and it derives from, it's a children of DbContext class, it automatically writes the constructor, requisite constructor for me, and also it creates a public DB set of product. Now all I have to do is to include this models folder, and everything is all right. However, at the moment when you perform a migration, it will create a table with the name products. But if you wish to create a table with any other name from this product model, then all you have to do is start writing on model creating. Now here in this code, I would actually want the migration to create a database with a products table, and I want to do it explicitly so that there is no room for error. So for that I need to install 2 more NuGet packages. So right click on the Razor product app and manage NuGet packages again, and then I'll have to look for these two. SQL Server, install this, and also Microsoft.entity framework core.tools. Install this also. I accept. Now if you look on the installed tab, all of these 3 related to entity framework core are already installed. Now let's close this window and come to this. Now everything is fine, so that squiggly line is gone. Now what does this line of code represent here? So in entity framework core, the DB set on T entity type, it represents a collection of entities of type T entity in the database. So in this given code snippet, public is of course the accessibility of the property. That means it can be accessed from outside the class, and DB set of product, this indicates that the property products represents a collection of entities of type product, and products is the name of this property. And in summary, and this is a getter and setter for any public property. The products property in the ProductDbContext class represents a collection of product entities in the associated database. It allows querying, inserting, updating and deleting product entities through Entity Framework core. So this part of the ProductDbContext, this on model creating by putting an argument of the model builder type, it allows you to create a table with the name products. So if you like the table to be named as just product, so just include product instead of products. But I want, because it's a products table, so it should be named properly as products. Okay, so that marks the end of this class. Thank you very much. Now after creating the ProductDbContext, we need to add the ProductDbContext class that we have created in the previous lecture in the services collection in the program class before we can carry out any migration. So again, back to our Visual Studio, and in here I have to register, like we have by default the add register pages have been added to this services collection. So I have to create the ProductDbContext that was created earlier. I have to add it to the add DbContext method. So let's start writing. Right, so again I am taking the help of GitHub Copilot. So all I had to write was to write the comment add the ProductDbContext service, and it has written it for me, the entire code, and all I have to do is to add on the data folder, and as SQL Server here something is also missing, so I'll have to use a Microsoft.Entity Framework core. I have to need to bring it on top with the user statement. Now let's try and understand this part of the code that was added to add the ProductDbContext service to the service collection class. Now builder.services, this accesses the iService collection interface, which is a collection of service descriptors. Services are components in ASP.NET Core that provide specific functionality such as database access, logging or authentication. Then comes this part, add DbContext, and it takes ProductDbContext and it creates a lambda expression like this. Option goes to options.useSQLServer builder.configuration.getConnectionString ProductDbContext. So this registers the ProductDbContext as a service with the DI or dependency injection container, and let's break down this method call. So add DbContext on ProductDbContext. This specifies the type of database context. In this case it is a ProductDbContext to be added to the DI container, and this part, this entire line of code, this configures the database provider and connection string for the database context. Here it specifies the SQL Server, that SQL Server will be used as the database provider, and the connection string is retrieved from the application's configuration using the key ProductDbContext. So in summary, the add DbContext method registers the ProductDbContext with the DI container, configures it to use SQL Server as the database provider, and specifies the connection string with the key ProductDbContext. So in this lecture we shall create the connection string in the app settings.json file. So let's flip over to Visual Studio once again. Now here if you look into program.cs, if you recall, so our connection string was with a key. It was registered as ProductDbContext. So we'll have to use this ProductDbContext as the key, and let's get back to our app settings.json file. Now you have this app settings.json as well as app settings.development.json. But if you just add the connection string to app settings.json, which is now the active tab, which is what I have opened, then it will create the connection string that will be valid depending upon the environment, and the environment is development environment, so I don't need to create it again on the app settings.development.json. Creating the connection string, adding the connection string to app settings.json will be enough. And if I change the development environment to staging or production, it will automatically adjust it. Look into the connection string, it will find the connection string from the app settings.json file. Alright, so let's write okay. So it is automatically prompting me to write the connection strings. Okay, so see, it has created a connection string. Now I will need to change it because it is not default connection, it is ProductDbContext that we got from here. Just copy it again. So ProductDbContext, and I will uncomment this part. Close the bracket here, curly braces, and this is missing a comma, so I'll put a comma after the object member. Now by default it has set a database name ASP.NET Web Application 1 and dash so on and so forth, which is very ugly, so I need to change it to a different, more user-friendly name of my choice. So let's give it a name, product database. So now this connection string will be used in our next step, that will be the migration process, which will create a database with the name product database with a products table. So this is again, I have taken help with the GitHub Copilot, but you can always write this code manually from your previous experience, or you can look for the code, which is you can find the snippet from internet, and it is a very helpful tool. It actually saves a lot of time typing. The common its autocomplete feature is great, but sometimes you need to change, like what I have changed here in front of you with the ProductDbContext for the default connection and the database name. Alright, so thank you. Now after doing all the plumbing in the previous few lectures, like creating the model class and then creating the ProductDbContext and registering the ProductDbContext as a service in the program class, and finally creating this connection string with the key that was created in the to register the ProductDbContext in the app settings.json to create the connection string. We are ready to perform migration, and migrations are the final step to create a Microsoft SQL database. So let's flip over to Visual Studio again. And for migration, I will use the package manager console, which is accessible from tools and NuGet package manager, and then package manager console. And here I will clear the earlier stuff. So it is all cleared, and then I will use, these are some of the commands that I have issued earlier. So add migration, finally we'll create a migration with the name create database. So this migration is applied, migration folders is created. Now that the migrations has been applied successfully and these two files have been created, so let's understand these two files one by one. And first is the product DbContext model snapshot. So here, this code snippet, it represents a snapshot of the model of the product DbContext class in entity framework. So DbContext attribute is, it specifies that this model snapshot corresponds to the product DbContext class, type of product DbContext. Okay, and build model, this build model method, it overrides the build model method of the model snapshot base class, and it's responsible for defining the database schema based on the entity types and their configurations. And then model configuration. So inside this build model method, the model builder parameter is used to configure the entities and their properties. And here is what each line does. I will come to this pragma, so this later. And this has annotation, specifies annotations for the model such as product version and the maximum identifier length, and use identity columns. Use identity columns configures the model to use identity columns for generating primary key values. Entity is the table, configures the product entity. Okay, and property. So property configures the properties of the product entity, including the data types and constraints. And has key. Has key, where is the has key? So has key ID, it specifies the primary key of the product entity. And similarly has column type, this is the data type. All of these are data type for the individual fields or columns. And to table, it specifies the table name for the product entity, which is products. Okay, and the pragma directives. So these pragma directives are used to suppress specific compiler warnings related to the deprecated APIs. Now this file, this is the probably the timestamp underscore create database. That was the name of the migration that I used. This creates two methods, up and down method. So, and it actually uses the migration as the base class, and the up method, it takes the migration builder object and it creates the table, whereas the down, it drops the table, and the name of the table is product. So in the create table, it actually calls the migration builder objects create table method, and it adds the name products, and it creates all the columns as new ID. ID is the of type int, nullable is false because this is a primary key, and this is the annotation was SQL Server identity 1 1. So auto increment and start with 1 and seed it with increment with 1. Okay, and name, then name other three columns here for this product model: name, manufacturer, and price. And the data type of these three fields or columns is string, and type is nvarchar max, nullable false. That's all of them are nullable false, they are not nullable. Okay, so this gives the description of the other three columns. And if there is any constraint, here it is the primary key, the PK products, which is the ID field, and this is to drop the table. Okay, we are still one stage away, that is the last stage is to update the database with the update database command. Okay, and if everything is fine, it will create the database. So this is creating all the queries and done. Okay, now let's see the database. SQL Server Object Explorer, SQL Server. So this is the Object Explorer for SQL Server and databases, and see, product database is already created with the requisite table, dbo.product table with the schema. These are the columns. ID, name, manufacturer and price, with ID being the primary key and not null. And you can see that there is, if there is any data or not. So click on view data. It is not there. There is no data at the moment. It's an empty table in the database. So thank you very much, and that's the end of this lecture. And we have been able to successfully perform the migration to create the database. In this lecture, we will delete and recreate the Index.cshtml file using Entity Framework Core to list all the products. Now, currently, if you look into the Visual Studio, if you hit the run button, the green button, the home page is nothing but a welcome page with no data. Okay, so we'll rebuild this home page or index page after deleting this to recreate it with the CRUD, this Entity Framework Core template, so that we can make it useful to list all the products. All right. So what we will do, we will delete the default index.cshtml page, delete it. It will delete both the code behind file and the cshtml file. All right, and then we'll right click on the pages folder, add razor page, and you have got three options: empty, using entity framework, and entity framework CRUD. So this is the most useful, I guess, because I don't need to write an empty page from scratch and show you by writing all the details which are not needed. These days, this is a less code, less is better, because most of the code is either generated through scaffolding or through some templates or even through AI that I have shown you earlier. Okay, so click on add. So this will be a razor page name. I'll still name it index, although I have the liberty to give any name, say home page or whatever. And then the template is important. Here it is a list template. Okay, create, detail, delete, create, delete, details and edit, but it is a list because it is supposed to list all the products. So this is the product model, and this is the only database context class is ProductDbContext, and click on add, and just keep all the other default values as I have kept, and updating dependency information. So generating the code, you can see. Now the index page is added to you, which is actually deriving from the base class page model class, and its template code is generated. So this is the DI. In the DI context, it has used the ProductDbContext. So razor product app.data.ProductDbContext, and then it has initialized IList type of product, and then it generates a asynchronous method on get async. So await on context.product.toListAsync. So a bit about this default and exclamation mark. So this default expression is used to indicate that the property product, okay, of type IList of product is initialized with the default value for its type, and it cannot be null. This exclamation operator is a null forgiving operator, which tells the compilers to suppress nullability warnings for that expression. Now this product property is initialized with the default value for IList product, which is null, since IList is a reference type. However, the exclamation operator indicates that this property cannot be null, hence the compiler will not raise the nullability warnings for it. In essence, this line ensures that the product is initialized and cannot be null, but it's initially set to null. And let's see a bit of the CSHTML file generated. So this is within a table class of table CSS style class table. It is generating all the table headers, and product 0.name, product 0.manufacturer, and product 0.price. So the 0th index of product dot price, and then it is in a for each loop. It displays this model. So in model dot product, within this product model, so it displays the items name, items manufacturer, and items price, and this is edit, details, and delete. So that's all. If you run this application, it will not show you anything, but it will show you the table headers. Okay, and if I click on create new, nothing will show because the create page is not delivered so far, but we'll come back and it will list all the products. If I quickly write something onto the database, it will show that value, and I will come back in a second after I have done that. So I have created an insert query. And let's run this query to update the database. So run this query, 5 rows affected. Right, now let us run this application once more. And here you can see all the record that is inserted. So this is nicely listed in the index method. So this query inserts 5 rows into the products table. Each row represents a product with its name, manufacturer, and price. Now if you quickly look into the database table, you should be able to find the data, view data. So all the data that I have pushed into the products table and the database is there inside this database, inside the products table.